Hello and welcome to Growing in Uncertainty. My name is Tess Miller. I'm a coach who helps people who are making transitions in their lives. They're living the life that they used to want, but they're ready to transition to the one that they're really made for. I believe that life is a series of transitions. We're constantly transitioning mind, body, and spirit. And my intention is to share how I'm personally navigating those transitions that are happening in my life in the hopes that you'll find something helpful in that too. Sometimes transitions can be really scary, or sometimes we can get stuck in the transition process, especially when we're being pulled in by what used to make us happy, but we really want something else for our lives now. So I hope these videos give you insights and tips and ideas and maybe even a little bit of courage to get moving in the direction of where you most want. So as you may know, my 2021 focus word is freedom. And today's topic has to do with getting free from a pattern that operates in all of our lives. I think it's pretty safe to say that this pattern exists in all of our lives. So let me give you a little context first. I recently found myself in a really uncomfortable situation. I've had this experience many times before. Every time it happens, I feel a little bit like Charlie Brown and the football, where Lucy says, "Come on, Charlie Brown, come kick the football." And then, he has that debate about whether or not to actually do it. He finally convinces himself, okay, I'll do it. And then at the last second, Lucy always pulls the football away. So anyway, that's what this experience recently was for me. I felt like I fell for it again. Usually if this situation happens, and if I'm really lucky when this situation happens, it's something that only plays out in my head and it doesn't make an appearance in public life, but sometimes it does trickle out into the public space. But I do know that I always learn something about myself or about other people or about how I want to relate to other people when I have this experience. So what in the heck am I talking about? I'm talking about those moments when I'm triggered or I have my buttons pushed or I get hooked by something that someone else said or did. I imagine if you're a human being, you too have had this experience where you get triggered by something and it's really easy to go into reactive mode. So today I'm going to take you through my process of understanding why we get hooked so easily or have buttons that get pushed so easily. We're going to get to the root of what can be learned from those moments. And we're going to talk about how to integrate what you learn in those moments in order to make lasting and sustainable change in your life. So first, let me tell you a little bit about what happened last week. I received a text message and I read it and I interpreted the text message. And for whatever reason, what was said in the text message triggered some pretty big feelings for me. I started feeling inadequate. I felt like I wasn't working hard enough. I felt like I was doing it all wrong, and I started to feel really insecure. My body responded by tightening up, and especially in my chest area, my stomach felt really heavy. And for hours, my mind got stuck in a thought loop related to this text message over and over again. I started thinking the same things. I would try to convince my mind to set it down and think about something else, but of course, my mind kept wanting to come back to what triggered me. So, part of that was that my body didn't want to let go of the feeling that it was experiencing in response to the trigger. And our bodies can actually be even more convincing than our minds in terms of keeping us stuck in a place. When we feel emotionally crummy about something, then our thoughts kick up and say, ooh, I can come up with a lot of reasons why you should feel that way. And then we just kind of perpetuate that moment. So anyway, in this situation for me last week, I stopped resisting and I let my mind go. I let it go. I stopped resisting the thoughts or trying to change them in any way. So I wrote out what that conversation looked like in my mind as I let it go. So my mind said, I can't believe that text. And my inner coach mind said, well, what did it say? My mind said, well, it said that I'm doing it all wrong. And my coach mind said, really, how so? My mind shared the text with me again, replayed it verbatim, and my coach mind said, how true is it that the text really said that you're doing it wrong? And my mind said, well, it didn't really say it that way, but reading between the lines, I knew that that's what they were implying. And my coach mind said, really, how could you tell? My mind said, because of the way they asked that one question. And my inner coach said, well, what's another way of interpreting or perceiving that question? And my mind said, well, maybe they were asking it that way because they wanted to actually support me. And my inner coach said, how reasonable is that interpretation? And my mind said, well, knowing this person, that's probably actually what's going on. And my inner coach said, oh, what are you experiencing with that mindset shift? And my mind said, well, my body feels more relaxed and I don't feel upset anymore. And seen. So what happened in that little mind thought train was that I was able to bring myself to a place where I could look at the text message in a completely new light. I was also able to shift to a different, more reasonable reality. I immediately felt better physically and emotionally, and I was able to think about other things. I was able to finally set it down. And then I had more energy for the rest of the night. Go figure. So I wish I could say that this is how I always responded to the triggering moments in my life, but it's not. I have plenty of times when I'll stew about something for a really long time, holding on to the feeling that, well, I'm justified in feeling this way. I know I am. And it's completely understandable that we have these moments when our buttons are pushed. But we're always at choice as to how long we want to stay there and whether or not we want to get out of that pattern and try something new. So let's talk about what buttons and triggers are, really. What makes us get hooked? I've come to realize that the things that really hook me aren't nearly as important as looking at why I got triggered in the first place. The button is actually there for a reason. It tries to protect us from going through painful experiences that we had previously in our lives. And it also alarms us to when a boundary has been crossed. The trick is to recognize that the person who pushed the button or triggered us has no idea that they just did that. And often they really didn't do it on purpose either. Reacting strongly to them in that moment is kind of like shooting the messenger. So the question is, what do you do when someone has pushed your buttons? How do you tend to react in that moment? Do you lash out at the other person? It's totally understandable if you do. I've been there. the reason we do that is because we are at the effect of some really, really strong emotions. Does that really have anything to do with the person who pushed the button or triggered us? No, probably not. But the other way that we sometimes try to deal with triggering moments is that we can try to stuff them down and just try to forget about it and just don't deal with it. Not dealing with our triggers ensures that we don't lash out at the wrong person, right? We don't end up with a conflict on our hands as a result of lashing out. But it will also ensure that you'll never figure out why that button is there in the first place, and you'll never really get to the root cause of why you reacted so intensely in the first place. So what can we do about that? When someone pushes your buttons, it's time to push a different button, a pause button, and really investigate what's going on. In fact, being triggered is a fantastic opportunity to uncover a wound that happened in your past and really try to let it heal. So I have 5 steps for dealing with these triggering moments, or when you get hooked by something in your life. The first step is to allow yourself to notice whatever triggered you or hooked you or pushed your button. One of the first things we tend to do is just resist it, right? Because it's such an intense feeling and we don't want to feel that way, understandably. We want to make it go away. It's painful. So the thing to remember is that whatever we resist persists. In fact, it even gets bigger if we resist it. So allow yourself to notice that trigger. Step 2, once you've noticed that trigger and how that trigger has been activated, if you can, find a quiet spot. If you can't right away, try to do it some other time later in the day. Try to find a spot away from other people where you can stay with the feelings that are coming up for you. Try to name your emotions as best you can. Notice any physical sensations that accompany those emotions and any thoughts that go with those emotions. Step 3 is ask some questions. This step is all about getting to know the trigger. You can ask things like, when in my life have I experienced something like this moment? Or when in my life have I felt exactly like this? Allow the memories to come up for you. Allow the feelings that go with these memories to come too. And try to look back as far as you can in your memories. Try to get to maybe the first time you ever experienced that feeling in response to a trigger. And then the next thing you can do is acknowledge and validate yourself. You can say things to yourself like, of course I felt that way back then. Anybody would have felt that way if they'd had that happen. Or, it's completely understandable that I felt that way. Or, no wonder I have that button related to this experience in my life. Step 4 is to investigate the boundary that was crossed in the triggering moment. We all have boundaries. Boundaries are the natural limits and rules that we develop for ourselves through life. They come from our values, our beliefs, our preferences for how we want to be treated in relationships. If you're uncertain about the boundaries in your life, I recommend that you go over to my website and find the core values exercise. That can be a way to figure out what you truly value and can be an inroad to figuring out what your boundaries are. Boundaries can also be healthy or unhealthy, which is a topic all unto itself, perhaps for another time. Boundaries can be damaged when they're challenged or crossed or disrespected by people in your life. I like to imagine a boundary like an imaginary wall. When your boundary or your wall was disregarded by someone in your life, that boundary has been punctured. There's a hole in that wall. And instead of fixing the hole when that boundary has been damaged, oftentimes what we do instead is install an alarm system. It's easy, right? You install the alarm system, but leave the hole because it's quick, it's easy, and then you'll know whenever anybody gets close to that hole ever again. If somebody does get close to the hole in your boundary, the alarm goes off, you're triggered, your button is pushed, and you know what's happening. But how long do you really want to go in your life before you fix that hole in your boundary? How often do you want to let that alarm keep going off by people stumbling across the hole in your boundary? And if you see the hole and do the work to heal it, you won't need that alarm anymore. You won't be triggered quite so easily or quite so often. So to relate this to the story that I shared, after doing steps 1 through 3, I found the hole in my boundary and I saw what caused it in the first place. It was definitely something from my past. And then I started doing the work to start to fix that hole. I allowed myself to see that the original boundary crosser wasn't there in this situation. And the current situation really wasn't presenting me with any danger. The alarm stopped and I felt a lot better. Step 5 in this process is to notice what and where you have shifted internally. If you learn something about yourself, it's really important to acknowledge and integrate what you've just learned into your whole experience of life. This shift can actually be what finishes the fix of the original wound. The shift is a sudden understanding that what happened then isn't happening now. And it's also understanding that now you have more agency to actually do things in a different way than you were able to in the past. One way that you can integrate this new knowledge is to write down in a journal what happened, what you went through, and what you learned from the experience, and how you're looking at that experience through a new lens. You could also tell somebody about it. Sometimes when we hear ourselves talking about a life experience in our own words, really helps to integrate that new knowledge into our knowledge base. Or if you want to be really creative, you could write a song about it, you could draw about it, you could paint about it. Be creative. Do something that really demonstrates to yourself that you got the message, you understand what's going on. So this step, like I said, helps your mind, your body, and your spirit to recognize that you did something to fix that hole in your boundary, and it's time to move on. So to be clear, there are times in which there are people who intentionally cross our boundaries. In fact, they know where the holes are in our boundaries. They know what our buttons are. They know what triggers us. And they do this because they want us to react. They want to feel like they have that kind of power over us. It's easy in that case to think, well, I'm justified in lashing out, right? I should totally get mad at them and start shouting and react. But the question to ask yourself is, what am I really looking to have happen by lashing out and reacting in that moment? If your answer is, well, I want that person to know how wrong they are and I want them to apologize and change their behaviors. But really, in all reality, is it really going to change things? how will lashing out at them help them understand that they're wrong? And how do you know that's not going to just make them get triggered and react to you? Chances are lashing out isn't going to do anything, and then you'll have wasted a lot of time and energy, and you can end up making the hole in your boundary even bigger. So, reacting to people who intentionally push our buttons actually gives them the power that they're craving. You're giving your own power away. Instead, if you can stay present with yourself in those triggering moments and use the exercise, those 5 steps that I shared, it could be really interesting to see how things turn out differently in those triggering moments. So, in the case of someone who's intentionally crossing your boundaries and pushing your buttons, the question really becomes, why would I want to be in a relationship who would intentionally do that to me? So, that sounds like another topic for another time as well. Tending to our own triggers, buttons, and where we get hooked, regardless of the other person's intentions, is a practice of self-care and healing that I really, really hope you'll try. I'd love to hear how this message resonates with you. If you'd really like to help me, which would be awesome, you could like or share these videos with friends and family who might also resonate with the messages and benefit from these topics. And if you want more free stuff, go on over to my website and subscribe to my weekly email list. I deliver free resources, updates, and developments in my offerings straight to your inbox every single week. And if you're ready to embark on some transitions in your life, consider setting up a free coaching session with me. You can sign up on my website, www.tess-miller.com. Go to services, click on the Test Your Wings complimentary session, and set up a time on my calendar. You can also find me on Facebook under my business name, Wings Unfolded, or you can find me by name on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Feel free to send me a private message. I'd love to connect with you. Remember that it's okay to be stuck, but you don't have to stay there. Have a fantastic week and take care.